Hey everyone, today I am super excited to be doing an interview with Blair Hickey, who is a co-founder of Casting About. Casting About is now a division of Breakdown Services, but originally it was and is still designed to help actors connect with casting directors and other industry professionals. It helps them keep track of projects they're in, and it helps them network. Blair, he's actually started his career as an actor, and he's also built up a very impressive list of credits on stage and in film and television. So welcome. Thank you so much for spending some time here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your career in acting and how you got into it. What are one or two of your biggest accomplishments, and then talk a little bit about Casting About as well.
Sure. Well, I did start in New York. I got my theater degree 100 years ago, and then went to New York right afterwards to try and figure out how to do this. Got started doing some recurring small roles on the daytime soaps. I was a reporter on The Guiding Light, and another reporter on As the World Turns, another reporter on All My Children. But that went on for a while, and I was doing as much theater as I could. Spent 5 or 6 years in New York, helping to run a theater company and doing what I say is like way the hell off Broadway, plays. And then did start doing a little bit more TV. Actually, I did an episode of Sex and the City, which was like kind of my first, on a real set. Not that the soaps weren't real sets, but you know what I mean? It was like a real weekly TV show, and I just absolutely loved it and realized I wanted more of that. And that kind of helped propel me to Los Angeles because I wanted to do more film and TV. And then so I've been out here almost 20 years now, which is nuts. And it's been fun. It's been okay. Working still, getting a couple commercials a year, doing a couple TV shows a year, a film every now and then. I've got tomorrow night is going to the screening at Netflix for a new Netflix film I did last fall, which is fun. I just actually really, really fun job. I had a scene on the series finale of Big Bang Theory a couple weeks ago, which was really great. It was like their last guest star, after 12 years, which was really fun to get that one on the resume. And so just, enough to be a working actor, to get my SAG insurance, and I'm married now with 2 kids, so I got to pay insurance for the family, kind of enough to keep me going, and I've learned a lot since I've been out here. And part of that education was Casting About, which was never the plan. Basically, and I've told this story a lot, but I got dumped by an agency about 12 years ago. They cut their client list in half to focus on series regulars, and I wasn't one of those. So I got the very sad phone call, and then had to kind of start over and find the people in town that I knew, and find the casting directors I knew, and the associates that I knew, and the ones I had worked with before this agency. And I had trouble finding them. In LA, they tend to move around a lot. They tend to change shows and change offices. So I kind of got obsessed with who was casting what and where were they, and keeping my own database of every television casting director in Los Angeles, all the associates, all the assistants. It was basically a full-time job. It's what I did, is trying to track all this stuff. So I became the guy that all my friends started calling, saying, hey, I worked with this associate 6 months ago. Do you know where they are now? Or I did a workshop with this person, and how do I get in touch with them now? And it was a friend of mine from acting class who pulled me aside and said, you should do something with this information. And my across the hall neighbor, my buddy, was or is an internet guy. And so we went out for burritos one day, and I said, hey, I got this idea, and I think it's a website. And we became business partners, and took about a year, but we launched this website called Casting About. And the idea was we would just track every TV show casting in LA and all the casting directors, basically because I wanted it for my career. And if friends could, if we could help them, great. That was 10 years ago, I guess, which I can't believe. And And it sort of took off. People started signing up, and people started using it in ways that I didn't anticipate. And I've learned a lot from them. And then, flash forward to now, I'm here in the Breakdown Services office. This is our little wing right outside that window over there. We've got a team of 4 researchers who are working all day, every day. And now we track all union TV and film casting in Los Angeles, and we do TV, film, and equity theater casting in New York. The idea is to maintain this database so other actors don't have to, and then use it to help build relationships. So it's been kind of amazing, actually. It was never the plan, but having a desk at Breakdowns is something that I've learned a ton about how casting directors work and how agents work in ways that I didn't necessarily think about, before I had this opportunity.
Nice. That's awesome. We'll be talking a little bit about your work on that side shortly, but I just want to go back. You said that your first real thing that you're super excited about was Sex and the City, getting that role. And I'm just curious, I mean, what specifically went into getting onto that? How did you do any active work on that, or was it just kind of something random? What factors do you think contributed to that?
Yeah, it's funny. It felt random at the time. I think the way a lot of things do for actors, you get a call, you get a chance to audition, and it happens. But in hindsight, I've been able to look back at what led to that. And I had been doing a lot of theater, little black box theater. I was working at spending my days at an acting school down in Tribeca, and we put on our own shows, and that led to forming a theater company with friends, and we were putting on other shows and showcases. And somewhere in there, an agent had come to see one of the shows, and we talked afterwards, and I went in to meet, and I ended up not officially signing, but sort of hip pocketing with them, saying I'm around and looking for representation. And they said, well, we'll keep in mind if something comes up, we could submit you, and we'll see how it works.
Yeah. Would that be called freelancing?
Freelancing, yeah. Yeah, sort of freelancing with, I had a commercial agent, but nobody theatrically. And so they said, well, let's freelance and see what happens, and let's work together. And it's funny, I kick myself. I mean, I really didn't do the work I should have done to maintain that relationship. I kind of thought, oh, well, they're freelancing, they'll submit me. And I kind of left it at that. So a lot of time went by, and I heard nothing. And I had a chance to reach out to them. I think a friend was working with them, and I was like, oh yeah, technically I'm freelancing with them. So I was able to touch base and say, hey, how you been? And I just did this thing, and how are you? And not too long after that, I got the call that said, hey, we've got an audition for you if you want to go in. And that was Sex and the City. It was, I think, maybe the first thing they had sent me in on. I didn't know much about auditioning for a show like that. Trek out to Silver Cup Studios, and I think I was naive enough just to kind of go and tell the story without thinking too much about what it meant. And of course, Sex and the City back then, it was the first season. It didn't mean what it means now. It was just a show that was shooting in New York, and so I feel very incredibly fortunate that I got it. It was a wonderful education in how a set works and how actors work. And Sarah Jessica Parker could not have been nicer. And watching her work was this great education. And was really one of the first times I thought that, being on stage was wonderful, but being on set for me was a whole different level of magic. And I wanted more of it.
Cool. Awesome. So I want to get into talking about promoting, marketing oneself as an actor. Now, you do a lot of acting work yourself, but you also speak to a lot of actors who do different things. What are some of the things that either you or the actors that you see are successful do on a daily or weekly basis to get paid acting work?
Yeah, and this is something I wish I could go back and do all again. When I got out of school, and it was an amazing experience. I went to Brown and got a theater degree there, and the drama program was phenomenal. I mean, I feel very lucky. I met some great people. We did some great shows, but it was sort of academic based. So, you know, at the end, it was sort of like, well, okay, who's going to LA? Who's going to New York? Get headshots and good luck. You know, that's about as much of the preparation that we had for the real business of acting. Mm-hmm. And somebody asked me recently, like, what's the biggest lesson I've learned in the 25 years I've been doing this? And I think if I could go back and do it all again, I would change the day-to-day. I would change what I consider my day job as an actor. Because I think when you first get started, it's so easy to think about auditions. I mean, that's the goal, right? Is I want to have an audition so I can get a job. So everything you do seems to be about auditions. It's get the right headshots so you can submit, so you can get auditions, and sign up for Actors Access so that you can get auditions, and go to a how to audition class so you know how to audition, and get an agent so they can submit you. You know, it's all about the auditions. And no one really talks about this idea of marketing so much. Mm-hmm. Which is essentially relationship building. You know, marketing is like kind of the business term, but in reality, it's about building relationships between people. And I think what I've realized is this business is not so much about, dear stranger, please give me a job. It's more like what I call sort of a peer-to-peer, storyteller to storyteller relationship, which is as an actor, as an artist, as a storyteller, I bring a certain thing to stories that is very much me. And some casting directors, you know, tell very similar stories. They bring themselves to certain stories, and they get hired because of the stories they tell. So I think my day job, really the day-to-day, is figuring out who I am as a storyteller, finding the people in town who basically tell the same story I do, and then building a relationship with them, because we need each other. Because it's, I need you and you need me, not, dear casting director, just give me a job. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's incredibly one-sided. So the day-to-day is a lot of research, I think. I mean, there's hundreds of casting directors and associates and assistants in both LA and New York. And they're changing jobs, and they're moving shows, and they're moving projects. And I want to know why. I want to know who's casting what and why. Who got hired on this particular show and why? You know, different casting directors get hired for different kinds of things. So I want to do research about who's casting this type of show that I feel I was born to be on. And then what else have they cast? And look at this. Oh my God, everything they cast is all my favorite stuff. And I feel like I belong to that universe, and I have a voice that can contribute to that universe. So now that person's on my target list. Now I got to start what could be a years-long process of building a relationship with them, introducing myself as someone who has something to offer, following their career, reaching out to congratulate them on promotions and awards, letting them know about my own career, saying, hey, I saw you just picked up the pilot about the new law firm, and I've made a career out of playing lawyers, but I've never had a chance to work with you. You know, offering that, hey, I know where I fit in this business, and I know what you're doing, and there's a point of connection there. And then building that over what may take, you know, years and years and years before an audition or even a job comes out of it. But that's ultimately what I think the day job is. And, you know, there's lots of ways to get into that, I think. But that kind of sort of meticulous research about who I am and who's doing what, I think is, I think where I would have spent all my time starting out if I could. And frankly, you do that kind of work smartly, the auditions will come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we spoke a little bit before we started the interview about the whole idea of sales versus marketing. And, you know, if you're looking at it from a business side, the word sales is kind of like when you're actually talking to the client and trying to get them to buy the product. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the audition process almost for the actor. And most actors just focus on that. They don't focus on the marketing, which is kind of either the building or the relationship, or, you know, essentially like setting up, I like to think of it in terms of systems, setting up some sort of system to make it easy to build those relationships over time. Yeah. You know, so it's not just like, I randomly thought that maybe I should reach out to this person today, but it's like, you know, once a month or something, I'm, you know, looking at my list and like who makes sense to reach out to at this point. And, you sort of created Casting About to give the information about these casting directors and allow people to be able to stay in touch with them. But I just have a question about Casting About, which is when I did my interview with Polly, who introduced us, she was talking about how she's able to write notes down and keep track of things in her own Casting About profile. So I'd like to ask, like, how does the program Casting About actually help you systematize that process of reaching out and staying in touch and marketing?
Sure. Well, we have the researchers who I can't talk highly enough about. All these guys sitting right out here. They're really good at what they do. So they're on the phones, they're on the computers, they're working the trades every day, and it takes 4 of them to keep track of all the information because things move a lot. Mm-hmm. So the idea is we now you log in anytime, to Casting About, and you're presented either, depending on what you're subscribed to, New York or LA, you have a list of every union project that is casting in that metro area and the full casting staff for that project, along with notes about the project and a log line and a link to the official, website, and then also social media links for the people involved too. So, we do Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So again, if you're doing research on a particular casting director, this is a way to get to know them better as a storyteller. Who are they? What are they talking about? What are they excited about? What are they getting hired and cast for? So I think how people are using it now, actually, when we built it 10 years ago, there's a little checkbox next to every name, and you can check as many names as you want and hit print, and it prints mailing labels for those people at whatever address for whatever project. And some of them have multiple addresses if they're doing multiple projects. So it was this great label making generator, and people would put them on postcards and mail them out. And still is something you can do, but it's sort of evolved. And I think more and more people are using it now as a research tool. So they are taking the time to build what I call a target list. So who in town needs me the most? I mean, I think that's a great way to look at it as an actor. I'm not going to be the perfect actor to everybody in town.
Yeah.
There are casting directors here in LA who cast projects that I could do. Sure, I could say all the words and I could hit the right marks and it would be okay. But okay is not enough to maintain a career. There are people in town who can tell that story better than I do, right? So I'm focused on the people who are telling the stories that I'm best at, who need me the most, and I'm following their careers. I'm watching associates that I know get promoted to casting directors. I'm seeing what new shows are picked up by teams that I've worked with. There's a casting office in town who I think actually the Big Bang Theory was my 4th project they've hired me for over the years. So anytime Valco Miller picks up a new show, I'm all over it. I want to make sure that I know exactly what the show is. I'm sending them a congratulations. I'm maintaining that relationship. So a lot of his research just to know. You don't know when that research is going to come in handy. A story I tell a lot is the very first woman who cast me in LA. She gave me my first role, which was 1 line on The Practice. It was, literally 1 line as a lawyer. But I have followed her career ever since, and that was 18 years ago. And so whenever Jamie is casting something new, I want to know. I want to send her notes. I know in the hiatus season, she casts plays, so I go see them, so I can kind of stay up and following her career. And I was on the Warner Brothers lot one day, and I knew from following her career that her partner had left to become a teacher, and that Jamie was casting a network 1-hour show by herself for the very first time. She was the big boss. And I saw her go by on a golf cart at the Warner Brothers lot. And I was able to say, Jamie, congratulations, big boss, way to go. And she stops the golf cart and says, oh my God, can you believe it? They gave me a bungalow. It's right over there. And we started talking about what it's like to cast a network show and what's it like being on the lot. And it was just, and it's not like, well, keep me in mind, Jamie. It's not that, it is just this relationship building sort of peer to peer that you never know when that opportunity is going to come up. So the idea is we give you all the information about who's doing what. You build a target list, people that you want to follow. For every person or every project, you can type in your own personal private notes, and every time you do and you hit save, it'll date stamp it. So you then have a running list of date stamp notes, which you can use. It's, you know, it's not a full-on contact manager, but it's basically a history of your contact with that person. Because you know, as well as I do, marketing is going to take forever. So it's this running history of, you know, sent them a postcard introducing myself, and then invited them to a play, and then went to see their panel discussion, you know, somewhere, and then read their book, and then sent a thank you, and then told them I got booked, and told them I had a new manager, and then got the audition. You know, whatever that long running history is. At least here's a way to kind of keep track of it. And you can do that for projects as well. If, you know, you go in to read for a project or get called back or whatever that history is there too. So the idea is to put all of the players in town that you're going to have to work with in one place, keep them up to date, and then let you use that as kind of the launch pad to maintain these relationships that I think you have to build.
Awesome. Now, Casting About, it's, you know, a really, really cool software and obviously extremely valuable to actors. Does it allow you to track, is it primarily casting directors, or does it track, you know, like agents or any other people in the industry, like even like directors or producers?
Yeah, right now we're just casting directors, because quite frankly, that's all the resources we have. It's a full-time job doing that. But we've talked about it, you know, agent about and producer about, and all those, you know, those things we could do.
That's cool.
And I think there is a space for that. It's Brian, who's my business partner. Brian and I tend to be kind of perfectionists, and, you know, if you're going to do it right. So we sort of carved out this box around all the union casting directors in LA and New York, and we put all our time into trying to do that really well. And then over the years, we've added, you know, the social media links, or we've expanded the notes section, or we try and we put our own public notes in about each project. So we'll mention, if it's a named producer or director or star, we'll put that in there to kind of help actors out. A little bit about the schedule information, you know, when it starts shooting, when it should wrap for the plays and musicals in New York, you know, when they go into rehearsal and when they're scheduled to open and when they're going to close, and, you know, stuff that's going to help actors. And for right now, that's kind of all we can handle. You know, I've got my own acting career and a couple small kids at home. So I'm I'm basically just tired all the time. And so it's something we'd like to do, because I think there's value there. There's the same principles of relationship building apply. And I hope actors are kind of maintaining that history on their own. But just because casting directors tend to move the most, that's why I think it's good to have this team of researchers out here tracking it for you, so you don't have to.
That's awesome. I mean, I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Casting directors do move a lot. With agents, it's kind of a different thing since they're not involved in the specific projects. But filmmakers, directors, producers, you know, all of those types of people, I think, are also good people for actors to potentially think about targeting on their own, like you're saying. You know, this whole idea of networking, you know, I think like something that I've been thinking about myself is showing actors more about like how to do almost cold email outreach potentially to up and coming filmmakers who haven't really done too much, but they reach out to them, say, hey, I saw this project that you did and I thought it was really cool. As someone who's in the industry, I'd love to take you out for a cup of coffee if you're open to it, ask you some questions, learn from you. And then actors kind of create these relationships with the filmmakers themselves who are up and coming. And then 5 or 10 years from now, you know, as long as they maintain that relationship, it could turn into some cool job opportunities. I mean,
I think it's great advice, because it's very easy for actors to fall into this weird hierarchy where we view ourselves as the wannabes, and all these other people, the casting directors or producers or directors, are sort of what I call these mystical gatekeeper people. Like, you know, if I can just please them, somehow they'll give me a job. And it took me a long time to get into the mindset to thinking that it can't be that hierarchy. It has to be peer to peer or storyteller to storyteller. Because ultimately, as an actor, in a professional actor, that's what you are. You are a freelance storyteller. And so are casting directors and producers and directors and writers. That's all we're all doing, is going from story to story, looking for other like-minded storytellers to all work together to tell this thing together. So I think, you know, finding, if you see an independent film or a short film or anything that really speaks to you, I think reaching out to that filmmaker is a great idea. Where sometimes we help try to teach actors here in LA is the impulse is to reach out to say, hi, I saw your film and I loved it. Can we meet for coffee? Or can you consider me for your next project? You know, that's a very easy thing to do, which is ultimately saying, hi, stranger, I want something from you. And I think networking gets this bad rap because it tends to, people feel like it's a little leechy, you know, that networking is like, let me go find people who can do things for me. And they get very nervous about, oh, what do I do? I hand out my cards. How do I introduce myself? And I think part of the problem is because people are looking at it backwards. They're looking at it as, what can you do for me? And not, what can I do for you? Or how can we collaborate together? So, you know, reaching out to say, I saw this film you did that spoke to me because that's the world I grew up in, or that's the world I live in, or I made my own film that it has similar themes, or it really moved me because of whatever, because that's the kind of storyteller I am. I would love to contribute to, you know, your next project. I mean, whatever the message is, you're basically communicating that there is something that you have that you want to offer this filmmaker or this casting director. I mean, that's that message I said before about, I saw you just picked up, you know, the new show about the law firm, and I play a lot of lawyers. The subtext is there is a reason why maybe we should work together, other than the fact that I just need a job.
Yeah. I mean, a super simple thing that is surprising, but a lot of people like is, and you can learn from it, is literally like asking a person for their advice, or just to chat with you and say, listen, I'm not here, you know, like some actors might be asking you for a job. I'm just looking to connect with people, speak with people, learn from them. Would you ever be open to either like meeting for coffee or having a phone call or something? I just have some questions to learn from, you know, a person who's in the industry and making cool stuff. And sometimes that itself almost is providing value to the other person, because it lets them like feel good. It gives them a sense of importance and stuff. And a lot of people like to give advice and help others, you know.
The informational interview, I think, is a very powerful thing.
Yeah. But that's awesome, because I was going to ask, like, you know, a large portion, it's extremely important to have the casting director's information, but you know, like you're saying, I mean, they are one of the gatekeepers, but they also, even themselves, they don't want to be seen necessarily as gatekeepers. I mean, I had an interview with Kimberly Graham, a casting director, and also Margaret Emery, an agent, recently. And both of them were telling me, you know, they're like, people look at us as like, you know, they look at the agent as like, I'm going to always be on your side when, you know, yes, I'm trying to promote you, but I also have other things going on, and my job is to get everybody work. And then the casting director's like, my job is not to say no constantly. My job is to find you and make sure that you are going to do your best in the role and be the right fit for the project. So even casting directors don't want to look at themselves as gatekeepers.
No, yeah. I mean, they want to be storytellers, because that's what they were hired to do, is to go find people who can tell this story. As a matter of fact, I try to remind myself that that's the casting director's job is not to hire me. Casting director's job is to parade about 5 of us in front of their boss, you know, and say, I vouch for all 5 of these people. And technically, what they're saying is, I stake my job on the fact that all 5 of these people can do the job. So, you know, if I'm in a callback or I'm at a producer's call, I try to sort of lean into that camaraderie. I mean, that's casting director and I are together saying, hey, we can tell this story, and let me offer you, you know, my version of your script. And it's very much this collaboration between the casting director and me, who maybe worked together earlier, you know, on a first call and tweaked it and changed it. And then now we're presenting that to the producer director. So it's not so much gatekeeper as fellow storyteller. I mean, that's kind of the mindset I try to keep.
Yeah, having that mindset is awesome. I mean, I think that people do need to keep that in mind. So thank you for bringing that up. It's
Yeah.
like the casting director is your friend. If you look at them like that, I think it'll increase your chance of actually getting a call back, because you might not be as nervous anymore. You might do a little bit better during the performance, you know. So,
Right. And then for what it's worth, to one thing that actually made a big difference in my career, and I've actually booked, I think, a lot more in the last, you know, couple of years. I look at the percentage, you know, of like calls or auditions to, you know, bookings, and it's funny because I don't actually audition as much, but I book more these days, because, well, it's a different approach. I think when I force myself to stop looking at casting directors as these gatekeepers, right? So, because I have what I call good student disease, which is, you know, please the teacher all the time. Like, I'm that nerd, you know, I want to get an A, I want to do well, I want to get it right, you know. And going into an audition room that way is tough because there is no right. And instead of just coming in and telling the story, now I'm worried about, do I do what the casting director wants? Am I pleasing them? Am I doing it the way they want it? Which is ultimately never going to be your best performance. Because as a storyteller, right, well, I have to remember that it's their script, but it's my story, right? It has to be my story. It has to be authentically mine. And that's my job, is to offer my story to them, my version of their script. So if I can go in and offer that to them, and I like that term offer because it's like saying, hey, here's my version of your script. Here's what's real to me. Here's what moves me. Here's what gets me excited. And if you can use it, great. And if you can't, I get it. There's too many variables, right? That's okay. I mean, if you need somebody, if you want a different story, that's fine. But this is the one that moved me. And now you know who I am as a storyteller a little bit more. So going in the room and delivering my story the most authentic way possible, you know, has made a huge change for me, because now, first of all, it's more fun in the room. I'm having a better time. And when casting directors, you know, if they can't use it, at least they're saying, you know, if it's real and authentic, it's going to move them. And I say that the worst that's going to happen is they're going to leave and say, oh man, I wish I could use that. You know, what else? Do we have anything else for him? Or how can I get him back in? Because that was really fun. What else can I do? And I think that's what helps build a career too, because I'm teaching them who I am as a storyteller. You know, that's, an audition is just another step in the relationship building, right? It's just, this is me, and now you're getting to know me better. And if you can't use me here, that's great, because that'll continue on down the road. So it's really changed what I do in the room, which it's something I think this approach to the business, this idea that storyteller, and marketing, building relationships, I didn't expect it to affect the craft as much as it does, or affect the art, but it really did. It sort of changed what I do in the room.
yeah, it's really good. I mean, there's an awesome book that I recommend. Actually, it helped an actor, even though it's written more so for service professionals, like business people. This book called Book Yourself Solid by Michael Port. And he talks, the whole like first like 2 or 3 chapters are focused on being authentically you and genuine, and understanding the difference between, like, he calls it a red velvet rope policy. Essentially, this idea of, like, you know, there are projects or clients out there that are specifically not meant for you. And there's other ones that are really meant for you if you're being your genuine self. And most of us and most actors tend to water ourselves down because we want to try to please everybody. And he's like, no, you know, he says, the quote is, he who trims himself to suit everyone will soon whittle himself away.
Yes.
You want to be who you genuinely are, and you bring that to each project. And what's going to happen is people will see that, or if they don't like it, that's fine, but you'll still feel good about yourself. And on top of that, after a certain amount of time, you'll kind of like get a genuine sense of which projects are even worth your time to go audition for, because you'll know
Absolutely.
whether, go or not.
Yeah.
So
Well, one of the things I've learned here at Breakdowns, I've been able to see kind of the backside of Breakdowns and the backside of Actors Access and see what a casting director account looks like, which means I get to see what 3,000 submissions for a one-line role looks like. I get to see what 3,500 headshots, that came in over the course of 2 hours look like. And I get to see out of the 3,500 headshots, the 20 people they picked to audition. I mean, really, it's like 2% of submissions.
Tell us a little bit about the specifics there. Are there any sort of like trends that you see or anything?
Well, yeah. And the biggest takeaway is the fact that most of the 20 people that they call in, 75, 80, 90, maybe all of them are people they know and people they've worked with. Because what happens is 3,000 submissions come in and they show up on the computer screen, little 2 by 2.5. That's the headshots are like this big. And there's 100 on a page and they scroll through 100 and then they flip the page, they scroll through another 100 and they're going, I know him, he'd be good. No, he's not right for this. He's not right. Oh, he'd be good, and they're doing it this quickly. Especially in TV in LA, it moves the fastest. I think film, you have a longer lead time. Theater in New York, you do have a longer lead time. So that's good. You have a little bit more time. But because of the sheer volume of submissions and the speed that is happening, and the fact that the casting director needs people they trust, right? If you're going to take 5 of these actors in to impress your boss and people who guaranteed can tell the story, you're going to pick people you know and trust, because for every person that they choose that they don't know, they stop on a headshot that looks right. Usually they take a look at the other headshots associated with that profile to make sure that there's some consistency there so they can get an idea. They may look at the demo clips. They may look at the resume to get an idea, who is this person I'm going to bring into my office? If you walk in the office and you're not what they expected, if you're not what your profile suggests you are, and they think, well, this is not the person to tell my story, I've just wasted one of my precious slots. I only had 20 slots. That's it. I had 20 actors. And that's one thing I never considered as an actor before I started here, was the amount of actors they see is just based on time. It's like, how we're going to cast on Tuesday from 10 to 1, 3 hours. That's it. I see 6 to maybe 10 actors an hour, maybe, if it's a small enough role. So that's 18 actors, 30 20, 25. I don't know, how many can I squeeze in? And that's it. That's all I have time for. So if I give one of those slots away to somebody I don't know and they come in and they are not what they represent, I have just wasted my time. I've wasted a slot. I've wasted a chance I could have given to somebody that I know and trust. So they tend to call in those people. Actually, let me take one step back.
Yeah.
Even before the breakdown goes out, a casting director is going to read a script, and they are going to, as they're reading the script for the very first time, hold up.
Sounded like it got widescreen.
Yeah, I know. Now I got a phone call that my computer just decided to jump in and ask me if I want to answer it.
Wow,
Sorry.
you're still on video. We just have a wider view now. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, it did get wider. I don't know why that happened.
Yeah.
It did here too. It's because I got a phone call. That's
magic.
Explain that to me. So when a casting director gets a script for the very first time, they read it, and certain actors are going to pop into mind because that's their job. That's what they do, right? So my goal is to be one of those people. Like, I want a casting director to read a role in a script, and as they're reading it, I want them to go, ooh, you know what? Blair'd be good for this. Let's bring Blair in for this. In order for that to happen, I have to have a relationship with them. I have to in order to spark in their mind, I have to cut through all the noise of all the, 100,000 other actors floating around who are constantly begging the casting director for their attention. And this goes back to your point about being generic. I think in order to stick in a casting director's mind, in order for them to say, ooh, you know what? You know, the thing that, like, Blair thing, like, that thing would be interesting on this role. I have to have a thing. Like if I'm too watered down, if I'm too generic, if I'm being everything to everybody, I'm just not going to stick in somebody's mind. They're not going to think of me first. You know, if you say, what about Blair? And they go, oh yeah, I didn't think about him. Well, that's because maybe there was nothing that made them go, ooh, what, you know, that thing. Actors are sometimes so worried about being pigeonholed. They like don't want to be too specific. And I think ultimately it's not about being pigeonholed. It's about being the most authentic storyteller you can be. I mean, what do you bring to any script, and really leaning into that so that casting directors start to remember you as that thing. You know, I hope they say, oh, you know, that Blair thing. So they either think of me first when they read a script, or when I'm one of the 3,000 pictures that's going by, when they see me, they go, oh yeah, Blair. You know, but they're not going to do that unless I have the relationship, unless they know who I am as a storyteller. Because every actor, and ultimately this is our gift, and I don't think actors realize this, is all of us are unique. We're, you know, who we are and our voice and how we are raised and our worldview and our point of view and what we're exposed to and everything that blends together to make us us. We are going to bring that to every script that we're given. And sometimes I'll say to a room full of actors, there's 100 of us in the room, and if I gave the same script to everybody in this room and we all said the same words and we even all wore the same costume, we would still tell 100 different stories. You know, we would all bring something unique. So what is that? What is that thing that you bring, and how do you lean into that? So then how do your headshots tell that story in varying ways? How do your demo clips demonstrate you telling versions of that story? How does your resume, you know, it's, and this, there's a coach out here in Los Angeles named Bonnie Gillespie, who has a great quote about resumes that says, a resume is not a history of everything you've ever done. A resume is instructions for how to cast you in the future, which I love. It is sort of like, this is who I am as a storyteller. So all of that then becomes your marketing materials as you start to build relationships with people. And that way, it's not so much about being lost in the mass and dear God, please somebody give me a job. It's like saying, no, this is who I am. This is how I sell myself for each individual story. And this is how I market myself as a storyteller to people in town who do the same thing.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting. It's kind of would you call it a brand? Like, because you know that term is thrown around a lot.
Yeah, and I think everybody uses different terms. I've heard there's brand, there's image, there's type, there's what's your essence, there's what's your energy, there's what's your thing. You know, pick the word that makes the most sense to you. But
I think it's really important. Sorry, that you're just saying the brand, because a lot of actors, I think of a type as like kind of like what they look like and their general personality. But the whole thing, the brand and the essence, is also like how you conduct yourself and like, you know, the general like little quirks and everything. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And if you can clearly define it, and then you know, put that out there all the time.
Yeah, ultimately, I think it's not just your brand is how you walk in the room too. You know, it's with you all the time. I think it's on interviews. It's on, you know, meeting somebody at a party in the business. It's walking to an audition room. It's all of that stuff, because it's you as a professional storyteller and how you conduct yourself and how you view this material. Which I think can help too, because, you know, sometimes you get nervous walking into a room because it's their room and you haven't been in it before. And where do I sit? Do I sit or stand? And what do I do? And a lot of that stuff tends to fall away when you have a point of view, when you're excited to tell the story, when you realize you are there to share your version of the story, you know, because then it's more like, well, this is a great opportunity now. Thanks so much for this opportunity. Let me offer you my story. It comes from a much more positive place, I think, than that kind of nerve-wracking, oh my God, I hope I do this right, you know?
I have two side questions. So you said that, you know, an actor who hears the fact that casting directors look through like 2,000 or 3,000 submissions in a couple hours might get overwhelmed. And, some actors, well, actually many actors, especially as myself, I started as a headshot photographer in the industry. I mean, a filmmaker originally, but
Yeah.
with headshots, how important is it that an actor actually submit a professional, like high quality headshot? Are casting directors looking very closely at that sort of thing in like all these pictures that come in?
Yeah. I think it's very important. And even more important than just high quality is honestly what story is that picture is telling, and I think people who take themselves seriously, who want to work in this business, who are investing in themselves in the business, are going to take the time to find a photographer who knows how to tell that story. A headshot is much more than just a pretty picture. It's not necessarily the shot that you or your mom love, but it's the shot that sells the story that you tell, the kind of energy you bring to the room and what you bring to the script. And I think if you're relying on a selfie or your friend snapping a picture from an iPhone, what story is that telling?
Yeah.
How serious are you about your career? Or are you taking the time to find, and the good photographers are storytellers too. They're not just there to take a pretty shot. They're there to talk to you, to find what moves you, what sparks you, what gets you excited, what you're telling through your eyes, and to find that moment when you do, and to capture that moment in different ways. My conversations with my photographer is great because I say, well, here's the story that I want to tell, and they're like, good. You know what? I want to change the lighting because I think we can tell that story better with a different light. And do me a favor, don't sit anymore. Let's stand, because even though I'm here, it's changing your energy. Let's do that, because now you're not changing it for the sake of changing it. You're not changing it to get a prettier picture. You're changing it based on story, if that makes any sense. So I think that kind of finding a photographer that you can speak story to and who understands you is incredibly important. And a lot of time should be giving those interviews, and finding somebody who understands the story you want to tell.
For a actor who's not 100% sure what you mean by telling a story in a photo, would you be open to giving an example of like a story that you've attempted to tell in one of your headshots?
Yeah, sure. And I think I got very lucky in that it came out of a conversation with a casting director, and I recommend any actor who has the opportunity to work with a casting director, well, I guess anytime, but especially more than once. This was an office. I think this was the third project they'd cast me on over the years. And they were on set. So, it was, again, thanks so much. I love working with you guys. I'm having a ball. And we were at lunch. I think we were at Crafty somewhere. And I said, hey, here's a question. When you call me in, why me? Like, when you think of Blair, why me? There's all the other actors. Why do you bring me in? Because maybe it's just because, we think you're good, or so. I don't know. That doesn't seem enough. There's a lot of good actors out there, so why me? And she goes, oh, that's easy. You're like the arm around you guy. And I was like, what? She goes, you're kind of the arm around you guy. So, when that shows up in a script, we're like, oh yeah, Blair could do that. And it was the first time I'd heard that as a term. And I thought, that's kind of awesome, because first of all, like, I'm a dad, and that's kind of how I look at life. And that's a term or a phrase that I could easily identify with. And she said, well, think about it. Like, do you have any commercials running right now? And I said, yeah. She goes, what are you in the commercial? I said, I'm a financial advisor. She goes, yep. Arm around you guy. And she goes, what was your last job before this one? And I said, it was a procedural. I was a lawyer. And she goes, well, what kind of lawyer? You like corporate shark, big, big industry? I said, no. I was like the pro bono public defender. She's like, yeah, arm around you guy. I'm like, oh my God. And I started to go back and I looked at the roles, and like, I'm the pediatrician. I'm the ER doctor who says it's going to be okay. I'm, the guy at the bank saying, no problem, we'll take care of you. I'm, there's a maybe a running theme, through this. And and I don't want to put too much of a label on it. Like, I don't think actors should go out and have to find a phrase. Like, I would never say to a casting director, like, you know, nice to meet you. By the way, if you're thinking about me, I'm the armorology guy. Like, I'm not going to print it on my resume. I'm not going to, it's only for me, right? It's only for me. But I look at all the roles I've done, and I look at the way that I approach story. And sometimes it even shows up in ways that I would never expect. And I've told this story before, is that I did I had a part on a show. It was called Touch. It was like a procedural. It was Kiefer Sutherland's show a couple of years ago. And the original breakdown was for this overbearing stepfather, which is not usually my thing at all. And I got the audition, and in the room, it was a little weird because there's all these like big football looking dads, you know, like big dudes with crop tops, these like kind of overbearing looking dudes, and then like me. And I ended up booking it, and it was unexpected. And in the breakdown, it was this overbearing stepfather who's a huge jerk, and not something I usually do. And the writer on set, you know, came out and she's like, "Oh, I'm having so much fun watching you. You play a great dick." Like, that was her quote, you know. And I was like, well, it was new to me, and I thought, this is different and kind of unexpected. But then it was funny. In hindsight, I go back and I look at that clip of the scene, and in the scene, I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter, and it's her sweet 16 birthday party. And her real father shows up, who's like this petty thief that I think is just a lowlife. And I'm a real jerk to him in a, you know, smarmy kind of like, "Oh, look, you made it. Isn't that nice?" And he gives her his gift, which is some little something he stole, I'm sure. And I take that moment to give her my gift, which are the keys to the luxury car, as I look at him like, mm-hmm. And I realize in the scene, literally, my arm is around her. I mean, literally, my arm is around her, because what I'm saying is, like, you are not good enough for her. You know, she's mine. I'm going to protect her. I'm just doing it in a really dark, kind of jerky way from the point of view of us. But from my character's point of view, I'm not a jerk, you know. And what somebody said was like, well, it's like this, almost the shadow side of arm around you. It's like, you know, it's still that, you know what I mean? There was still, and maybe that's why I booked it over some of those other guys who were kind of bigger and more, you know, gruff looking on the surface. I don't know. But what I found is there does seem to be this kind of common through line through a lot of what I do. So if that's how people are going to hire me, then why not lean into that? Because I can bring that to comedy and drama and stage and film and TV, and I'm not going to feel pigeonholed at all. You know, I've been, you know, in a White House bunker as a military analyst, helping, you know, again, I'm helping to solve, you know, government problems. I've been doctors and lawyers and dads and camp counselors, and, you know, sometimes dark and sometimes funny and sometimes dramatic. And I don't feel pigeonholed at all. So why not lean into it? So when I went to my photographer, I was able to say, look, what I want is basically two versions of the same story. I want, like, the corporate, you know, put me in a tie, because that's what I do. Put me in a tie, and through the lens, the story that I want is, you're going to be okay. Trust me. This is going to be okay. I've got this. You know, it's confidence and it's security, and it's, I won't let you down. And that's a very specific thing that I'm selling, that I'm telling. And the photographer can look for it, and we can adjust posture and lighting to sell that story. And then I can, you know, got some stubble and a t-shirt, and I'm the guy next door. And what I want to sell is, how can I help? You know, I'm the neighbor, I'm the friend, what can I do for you? I'll watch your kids, mow your lawn, borrow my, you know, my car, what do you need? And again, that's a different energy, a different sort of tone, but versions of the same story.
Yeah.
You know, and what's great is, as people get to know me as that, as I lean into that, sometimes what they can do then, because it is specific, they can start to say, ooh, you know, it'd be interesting. You know, that thing Blair has, what if we married that with this role, which people wouldn't normally think of? Wouldn't that be interesting? I mean, quite frankly, you know, I wish I'd get more of this. And my manager is starting to actively push, when you need, like, the serial killer. Wouldn't it be cool if the serial killer is the Modern Family dad from next door? You know, you start to, you know what I mean? You can start to play with that.
Yeah.
And you know, then you get your Ted Bundys. But I can lean into that and start to get people to remember me as that, and get very specific about what I'm selling. I'm sorry, that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but
That was
hopefully
amazing. That story is really, really awesome for people, because a lot of people like hear the idea of brand and they don't understand until they start to hear examples, and you just kind of went through your own thing. So that's, you know, it's amazing. Thank you. I know that we're kind of like running out of time here. I mentioned just before that I had two side questions. That was the first one. The second one was just now, you know, Casting About, it gives you the contact info and all this stuff for casting directors. This is just a side question.
Yeah.
What should actors not do when talking to casting directors?
It's a great question.
Not use your program.
Yeah, it's a great question. Don't stalk anybody. Don't jump out of the bushes. You know, don't send, you know, cards with glitter in them. Don't try to get noticed. All those things that you hear about. What all those things have in common is reaching out to somebody with the message, with the subtext of, dear whoever you are, please give me a job. Right? That's not the point. That is not relationship building. That is leechy, and that is junk mail. Yeah. What they should not look at the list of names on Casting About, or the list of projects, as, ooh, these are the people who are going to give me a job. Now, ultimately, yes, I hope a lot of them do. That's the ultimate goal. But instead, what they should do is look at, these are the people, the fellow storytellers in town that I have perhaps an opportunity to work with, right? So what they don't want to do is send postcards that say, dear casting director, please consider me for anything you're doing. And that's a direct quote, by the way. I've seen that postcard in more than one office. I've also been in offices where they've shown me the stack of like postcards or headshots that are just blank. Like, here's a headshot with nothing. The subtext there is, please hire me, I guess. To which, anytime you have any contact with a casting director, and that could be in a room, at a party, through a headshot, inviting them to a show, any contact whatsoever, I think you have to consider that the casting director is going to respond with, why you? You know, can you consider me for any audition? Well, why you? Can you, you know, bring me in? Why you? Can you come see my show? Why you? There has to be a reason. There has to be this sort of like, hey, I know what I do, and this is, you know, what I do, and this is what you do, and there's a reason maybe we can work together. I mean, in New York, I know so many friends that smart, you know, they go to grad school, you know, and they're at NYU or Juilliard or wherever, and they do some amazing productions, you know, and then they graduate, and somewhere off Broadway, somebody is casting that same show. You know, if you're not reaching out to say, hey, I just graduated, you know, from Juilliard, and I see you're casting, you know, Othello, and I had a chance to perform that, and it was one of the greatest experiences, and I would love an opportunity to do it again with you. The message there is, at least I know who I am, and I know what I do, and I know what I can contribute to what you're doing, you know. So this idea that, like, okay, who can I leech off of? Who can I convince to give me a job? Is something we all tend to do without realizing we're doing it. And I would just advise any actor to avoid that as much as possible. I mean, I like to think of it as, it's really coming at this business from a place of service. What can I bring? What can I offer? What can I do? And sometimes that's literal. Sometimes that's, hey, I heard you need a reader. Can I help? You know, that's a literal, how can I help to a casting director? But I think more often it's, how can I bring my story to what you do? Can I offer my story to what you do? And I would encourage, do what you can to try and build those relationships, which may mean lots and lots and lots of research before you even reach out at all. You know, I think reaching out too often, reaching out too soon, reaching out to too many people in that kind of impersonal junk mail kind of way, I just don't think it's worth the time or money. So don't do that.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. I think that sometimes actors sort of get into a desperate feeling where they're like, I need something, and so they resort to doing things that are like the opposite of ever going to get them something, you know.
And that desperation is obvious. That desperation comes through in the subtext and the tone of all those things, and that's not what you want.
All right, excellent. Well, my last question, because this has been really, really awesome, and I want to be respectful of your time, is just if you had to give some advice to an actor who's, wanting to move their career forward, maybe they're feeling like they keep on doing the same level projects, like let's say they're getting some small, like just like speaking roles on things, just like very small roles consistently, but they want to move up and start getting something bigger, or like something that they feel is more like recurring credit or anything like that. Do you have any advice that you could give just in general?
Sure. First of all, keep training. Never stop. I have such respect for the acting profession. I think it's a lifelong pursuit. I think we can always get better, and we'll never quite master it. So keep training, so you have more to offer. Also, and this is advice maybe folks might not hear a lot. It might not seem to connect, but I think it does. Start paying attention to story in your life. Everywhere that story comes up, and I even like keep a journal. Like I had a casting director once give amazing advice, which was, what books are on your bookshelf that you'll never ever get rid of? Like which ones are dog-eared and you've read 5 times and you will read again, and you'll never give away? Why that story? Why that book? What late night movies do you watch that you can't turn off? It's midnight and you gotta go to bed, but something comes on, you're there 2 hours later. Why that movie? What songs make you cry? I don't know. What pay attention to story in your own life, because I think if you really look closely, you'll start to find a through line between all my favorite movies and my favorite books, and they're kind of the same themes and the same stories keep repeating themselves. And oh my God, there's this new show I can't wait to watch. Well, why? Or if friends say, hey, I have a new play, would you come, do a reading of it for me? Why did they think of you for this part, not somebody else? Why are they thinking of you for a particular story? And write all that stuff down, because once you start to get a handle on what stories are resonating with you deep inside, it's going to start to connect with, oh my God, the biggest, the best, most fun I've ever had on a set was telling a story that's very much like this. Or it's funny, all my little tiny parts are not really what I love to do, but when I tell this story, I get hired to do bigger stuff because it's connecting more deeply, within me. I often said there's a very fine line in the casting room between somebody who does a really good job, like they leave and the casting director goes, yeah, that's great, nothing wrong with that at all, that was no problems. And then the next guy comes in and does the exact, more or less the same thing, but yet there's goosebumps, like, oh my God, that was amazing. And I'll ask a casting director, what's the difference between like goosebump guy and, that was pretty good guy? And they're like, I don't know. It's like this magic connection. I think it's because the story hit home with the second guy on a much deeper level. So what stories do you connect with that way? Because now you can start to change your branding. You can start to change your image. You can lean into that story and tell people, this is the story I want to tell, and reach out to filmmakers. Like, I was born to tell the stories you tell. I would love to work with you. Because now when you go into a room, there'll be more of a connection, and you'll start to, and I think ultimately we'll start to book more. And I would do everything I can. I would spend all my time and energy on building those relationships, doing the research, finding the storytellers who tell that kind of story, reaching out to them over the very long term, trying to build that relationship and not worry so much about the auditions. I really believe that they will come if you build the right relationships and really lean into who you are as a storyteller, because then people are going to want you to tell more of that story. They're going to want you to do a bigger part. I sometimes I've been on a couple, and it hasn't happened a lot, but once or twice, a story that I love telling on set, I was having so much fun that they wrote more for me to tell. That's when they add another scene and they say, can you stick around another day and do more? Because we love what you're doing. That's how parts grow. And I think that's how people start to trust you for bigger roles.
Yeah. That was excellent. And that, goosebumps thing that you just talked about, I wrote down, that when you get that feeling after seeing a performance in an audition, it's like, that could in some cases be that deciding factor, and actually in many cases would be the deciding factor, at least, as you, as opposed to somebody else who's going to be able to audition now for the director or, the rest of the people in the production.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, in general, I think that like actors who listen to this or watch this interview with you, this is going to be one of the coolest and most valuable ones that I've had the opportunity to do so far.
Oh, thank you. I hope so. I mean, I've learned so much. I think having the opportunity to be here at breakdowns and see how casting directors work. I wish I could go back and do it all over again, man. If I could start over again, I think I would do things differently. But it's fun to be able to kind of share this with other actors, and it's inspiring for me too. So that's cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. And
right.
I'm very, very excited about this one.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.